Okay, the meeting is now live.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Employment Committee. My name is Ben Dowling. I'm the chair of this committee. As you know, the meeting is being broadcast to enable press and public to view it, and we're meeting virtually in response to the limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. The City Solicitor has advised that pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meetings Regulations 2020 number 392. As is now common courtesy and practice, can we make sure that we've got microphones turned off when we're not speaking, but turned on when we are speaking? Unless, of course, you're speaking to somebody not in the meeting, in which case remain turned off. We'll do a quick round robin of who's here. If people could just say hello and let us know that they can talk and that sort of thing. So, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Hello, I'm Gerald Van Jackson. I'm one of the councillors on this committee and leader of the council.
Thank you. Councillor Winnington.
I'm Councillor Matthew Williamson. I'm a standing deputy for this, and I'm standing in for Councillor Darren Sanders today.
Jones.
Hi, my name's Councillor Donna Jones. I'm the Conservative Group Leader and Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Atkins.
Hello, Chair. Yes, Councillor Matthew Atkins. I'm a full-time member of the committee.
Thank you, and Councillor Corkery.
Afternoon all. Cal Corkery, Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward.
Wonderful, thank you. We also have a number of City Council officers joining us today, and we could likewise say a quick hello and introduction. We'll start with the Chief Executive.
Hello, David Williams, Chief Executive, Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you. Natasha.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. Sue.
Sue Page, Finance Manager.
Thank you. Jess.
Hi, Jess Burkett, Human Resources.
Thank you. Peter. City Solicitor.
I just managed to mute myself. There you go. Sorry, City Solicitor. Thanks.
Thank you. Vicky.
Vicky Pleathouse, Democratic Services here.
Thank you. And Jane.
Hello, and Jane Didino, Local Democracy Officer.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful. That takes us to the first item, apologies for absence. We've already heard that Councillor Sanders had to give apologies and Councillor Whittington is deputising. We are otherwise all here, so thank you. Moving on, item 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody have anything they need to declare for the meeting? No, nothing. No one's trying to get my attention. Wonderful. We'll move on. Thank you. Obviously, if you think throughout the meeting of something that does create a conflict of interest, please make sure you make myself and the rest of the committee aware should it happen. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting held on the 14th of January. Does anybody have any issues with them, or can we otherwise approve them? Everyone is happy. Wonderful. Let's just consider those approved. Moving on to the first kind of significant item of business today, it's the Gender Pay Gap Report, and Jess is going to present this for us.
I will, thank you. So the Gender Pay Gap Information Regulations, they came into force in 2017 and requires all employers with over 250 employees to report their gender pay gap annually. So in addition, as public sector employer, local authorities are subject to public sector equality duty, which means we also need to be looking at ways to eliminate discrimination and advance equality. So the purpose of the report is to achieve gender equality across the UK and to increase pay transparency. So this isn't a locally derived initiative. This is PCC feeding into a much bigger national picture of gender pay gaps, but also using those findings to improve equality and diversity across our workforce. So a few statistics to draw your attention to from the report that will actually impact on our gender pay gap. So the council's workforce is made up of 72% females and 28% males. The majority of these males work full-time, that's 75% of our males, and the majority of females work part-time, that's 66% of females. The mean gender pay gap for 2020 is 10.99%, and this means that on average, men were paid 10.99% more than women. And this is a slight increase from 2019, when the mean gender pay gap was 9.57%. Now, the main reason PCC has this gender pay gap is likely to be because the majority of the workforce are female, and predominantly a large proportion of these are employed in lower quartile pay bands, with fewer women paid at more senior levels, and that will all impact on our overall average. PCC's gender pay gap is lower than the national average for employees, which was 15.5% in 2019. As previously requested by members, the report breaks down the workforce by age and gender pay gap at each age range. And that helps to give us an indication of the differences across the different age ranges. And although we have an overall average gender pay gap, we actually have some age groups where women are paid more than men. And this is illustrated with a negative percentage figure in the report. So between the ages of 22 to 39, full-time female employees are paid more than men, and so are part-time female employees between the ages of 16 to 21. Whereas male employees over the age of 40, they tend to earn more than female employees in the same age brackets. So in terms of our action plan, we've been focusing on improving equality, diversity and inclusion across all of our groups of staff. This includes looking at factors such as recruitment processes, looking at job redesign, reviewing our marketing material to ensure it promotes diversity, and we're beginning to advance our monitoring reporting of applicants to see who's applying for our jobs and whether there is an imbalance on application or promotion level. We're also looking at ways to progress staff and reporting, and this is through apprenticeship schemes, but also training courses such as Springboard for Women. Further work is being undertaken to look at future flexible working practices and how these are promoted across the council. And we're progressing with our widening of our data collection and analysis so that we can better understand the trends that we're seeing, and we're able to improve the equality, diversity and inclusion across our workforce. Okay.
Thank you, Jess. Sorry, I was doing reading a couple of lines of the report at the same time listening to you talking about it, which is not good practice, and I apologise for it. Members, any questions or comments? I'm happy to just take them together. Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious if we have any knowledge on people working in outsourced council services, and whether we are able to take that to account when we're looking at our gender pay gap. I mean, the obvious kind of service I'm thinking of where there's a large number of staff is, of course, social care, where primarily female workforce on low pay. So I appreciate, I don't think it's taken into account with this report, but is it something we have any knowledge of, or anything we can do, any work around to improve our knowledge in future?
Yeah, you're right. This is actually concentrating on just our employees within Portsmouth City Council. Everyone has, if they've got over 250 employees within their organisation, they will legally have to sort of promote what their gender pay gap is. So it will depend how many employees they've got. It's certainly something we can look if they do publish it. They should be publishing it on their website, but also nationally as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or queries from anyone? Okay, wonderful. Jess, I would just ask for a bit of clarification, or I think I understand the table. So looking at particularly that age range of 40 to 60, thinking about part-time employees, it shows as a very high gender pay gap. Is that because there is one, or is that due to the low number of male part-time workers skewing the statistic?
Yeah, I mean, it could be because a lot of it we don't know. It sort of gives you something that you want to know more about, and that's why we're going to be improving our data. It can be because we've got more people, you know, of one gender in one group than the other, so that can skew the data.
Okay, I suppose it's about understanding the different levels at which those age groups work at. Okay, well, it's still a helpful report, but as you say, better data will help us better understand what's going on. Anything else from other members? If not, I'm happy for us to note the actions, agree what's recommended, and move forward. Natasha.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that one of the other things that we're looking at for future years reporting is on the point around data, because it's something we're anticipating coming in through legislation, is also to look at ethnicity pay gap reporting. So we are hoping to incorporate that as well as gender pay gap reporting going forward in future years.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. And I think that's a positive move forward. Okay, wonderful. In which case we'll consider that approved, and we can move forward. Next item is on the quarterly sickness absence report. I think that's back to you, Natasha, to talk us through it.
Yes, thank you. So members are asked to note the sickness absence for the last quarter, but just a few highlights from that. There's been a slight increase in absence from 9.22 to 9.45 average days lost per person. That equates to working time lost increase from 2.57 to 2.59%. That excludes our schools. It's driven largely by an increase in long-term absence, although short-term absence has decreased over that period. It remains the case that the main cause of absence is psychological reasons, so stress, anxiety, depression. The second highest, as has previously been the case, relates to the musculoskeletal category of absence. But the third highest reason for sickness absence over the last quarter has been related to COVID absences, and as you would expect, a lot of that taking place in adult social care, with a lot of the staff on the front line supporting our response to the pandemic throughout this period. We've continued to have a very strong focus on well-being for staff, focusing particularly over the last quarter on domestic violence, NHS screening programmes, long COVID, as well as national campaigns that took place over the last quarter, notably Stoptober, Movember and Dry January. The last quarter also had a particular focus on mental health, and we continue to focus on that going forward, particularly focusing on ongoing training, increasing the number of wellbeing champions that we have, which have increased to 49 over the last quarter, which is great, as well as accessing more of the available functions and services provided by our employee assistance programme. We are also working with Solent Mind on developing more tools for our management population to help them identify the signs of stress amongst staff, and so managers are better able to cope with any staff that present with any mental health or anxiety type conditions, so that we're better able to support those staff. In addition, we've had some specific interventions in particular services where we have identified high levels of stress and anxiety, parachuting teams in to work with those staff and with those management teams. So although it's positive that short term has decreased, we have seen a slight increase in long-term absence. But I would say that that is also typical of the time of year that we've seen over the last quarter. But I will stop there for questions. You're on mute, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha, for introducing that. Again, we'll take questions and comments together. Councillor Willington.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions, Natasha. On the percentage that we've got there in terms of the amount that's mental health, so psychological, etc. How does that compare? So I'll start with this. How does that compare to the previous two quarters?
I think it's fairly steady. I'd need to look back over the data, but it continues to be the highest cause of absence. I think given that we've had a pandemic over the last year, it's not surprising that that's the highest level and the highest cause. We are expecting it to increase, however, in view of the impact of the pandemic. But I will double check and come back to you offline on how it compares to the previous 2 quarters. Thanks.
Oh, and seeing as you mentioned Silent Mines, I should declare my interest that I am employed by Silent Mines, but not in an area that would be involved in interacting with the council on this. My other question was, you talked about training and specifically around mental health. What is that general training for members of staff as a whole, or is there specific training for managers to support their teams?
It's both. So we've secured a further 2 years worth of training for both staff and management population.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you both. Any other questions or comments from members? No. Okay, Councillor Corkery.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the services where sickness absence has reduced, would I be correct in thinking that there are likely to be services where perhaps there's been greater levels of working from home and kind of flexibility afforded to people over the course of the pandemic? And if so, what knowledge do we have of the relationship between those things?
Yes, there is a correlation between an increased amount of working from home and lower sickness absence levels, particularly on the short term. In terms of what we know about it, there is a vast amount of research available from several years now that does show typically a decrease in sickness absence related to more agile working. And so that is something that officers are starting to look at in terms of what we do going forward in the future as a city council in terms of working practices and how we might make better use of the flexibilities that we've seen and seize the opportunities that we've seen over the last year.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you both. Unless there are any other further comments, I think we're in a position to move forward. Are we? Yes, we're all happy. So as per the recommendations. Wonderful. Thank you, no dissent. So that moves us forward to the pay policy statement. I think this is back to Jess.
Yes, thank you. So hopefully you'll be familiar with this report as it's brought to you each year. So under the Localism Act, the council is required to prepare an annual pay policy statement, which needs to be approved at full council and published on the council's website by the end of March. The purpose of this is to promote openness and transparency of pay and details the council's policies towards a range of issues relating to the pay and workforce. Yeah. That's it, so it's a short one.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, as you say, we get it every year. Questions and comments, members? Nothing. Okay, in which case, it has to go forward to full council. So if we need to have a discussion, I'm sure we'll do so there. In which case, I'll take that as approved for moving forward. Thank you, Jess and members. This is the fastest employment committee meeting in a while. I wonder if it will continue. Update on the living wage accreditation, Natasha.
Thank you. So I think this will be probably a standing agenda item for a while. We'll propose to update members regularly on the work of the living wage working group. At the last employment committee, officers were asked to pull together a working group and develop a detailed implementation plan to seek accreditation that can be presented to full council. And so the update today is just to brief you on where we've got to. So the working group is now up and running. The unions have been invited to join the working group. And I believe the first meeting of the working group with the unions took place earlier today. That has a set of terms of reference to take the work forward. In terms of the accreditation process, there are 2 main areas that we need to satisfy the Living Wage Foundation with. The first is that we pay all of our staff the real living wage, and the second are directly employed, and the second is that all of our contractors pay their directly employed staff the real living wage. So on the first point, in terms of our directly employed staff, we already pay our directly employed staff the real living wage, and we have at the previous employment committee sought and achieved approval to increase the living wage to the current rate as of the 1st of April, which will be £9.50. We have actually also gone beyond that minimum requirement to make sure that all people joining the Kickstart programme, the government's Kickstart programme, will be paid the real living wage, and we are also paying all of our apprentices the real living wage as opposed to the national minimum wage that apply to each of those groups. So we're going over and above on that side. The main area of work that we're focusing on now is to review all of our contracts with third-party suppliers who are in scope for the real living wage accreditation. And we are now focusing on identifying those contracts where they are due to fall, when their renewal dates are, or when any new contracts might be put in place. And working towards encouraging those suppliers to start to pay the living wage where the budget allows within those services as a soft approach to achieving accreditation. We're combining that with the work that we are intending to progress on social value. A social value policy is going to the Cabinet on the 9th of March for approval, and subject to that approval we'll be combining the two areas of work because they will be similar in terms of reviewing our third-party supplier contracts from a social value point of view, and where living wage rates of pay are actually contributing to social value. So we have an opportunity to combine those areas of work. So that is now underway and going forward. Once we've got a detailed implementation plan and we've got things further progressed in terms of understanding the financial and legal challenges, that plan will be presented to full council in due course for a decision by the full council to progress to accreditation. And we'll update you accordingly as the work progresses.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natasha. And apologies, everyone, if you can hear a lawnmower in the background, as clearly they've decided to mow the lawn outside. Leader, I think you want to come in here.
Thanks, Chair. A really important report for us today about taking the steps forward on this. And I think, Natasha, you're right, this should probably be a standing item on the agenda until we've got that accreditation sorted. I know there was the hope that we would get somebody from Living Wage Foundation to be with us here today, and that's not proved possible. But I wondered if it's possible to see if we can get somebody scheduled in for the next meeting, because this is the second meeting in a row where we'd hoped to have somebody and they've not been able to appear. I think this will take time to get right. I know that the work that housing have done look as if they've reduced the cost envelope that they were being asked to look at by at least half. And if we were able to do that across the rest of the council, that would make a substantial financial difference in our ability to do this. But as we'll be doing it over time, as contracts come up for renewal, there is a gradual approach to this, which will make it easier to do. But I think it's really important that we are aiming to get this accreditation, and I think we will probably be one of the very, very few unitaries on the South Coast to be able to be in this position of being an accredited living wage foundation payer, and that's an employer, and that's a very good place for us to be. But it's good to see the steps going forward to this happening.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I agree. There's an important kind of leadership piece for us as a council here in terms of the wider economy and the wider workforce in the city and beyond. So the fact that this is moving forward, and actually, whilst that we obviously have financial limitations, it's moving forward at pace. Councillor Corkery.
Thanks, Chair. Just to start with a quick question. In the report, it talks about there being one local authority maintained school that is not paying its staff the living wage. What do we know about the reasons for that? And is it the case that they're planning to move towards it, or have they just outright said that they can't do it?
It's a financial issue to do with their budgets, but we're continuing to work with them to find ways that we can support them to pay the living wage.
Okay. And I mean, it being a local authority maintained school, I don't quite understand the kind of complexities of that, but does that mean then that we can't require them to do it?
No, we can't. The schools have delegated authority on their budgets, so we cannot mandate it, but we will continue to work with them to support how they can achieve that. They want to. It's more a case of how they can afford to.
Okay, and is there a period of time over which we can expect that to be resolved?
I can't hand on heart tell you because I'm not as sufficiently close to the detail, but I can certainly come back to you offline and once I've spoken to the team who engage directly with the schools on this.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be helpful for the committee. It just seems clearly they're an outlier in terms of all the other schools are doing it and the local authorities doing it. I'm not quite sure, obviously, about the local specifics why they can't. So it'd be good to find out and see what we can do to apply the requisite pressure to ensure their staff are paid fairly. In terms of timescale,
Cal, you have friends who are governors there, and they may be able to help.
Okay, well, let me know what school it is, and I'll see what I can do. In terms of the timescales for the accreditation plan, so kind of from the plan coming into it being achieved for all contractors to pay a living wage, what kind of time period are we looking for that plan to be spread out over?
Well, much of that will depend on the review that we do of contracts. At the moment, until we're accredited, we can't mandate any supplier to pay the living wage, the real living wage. However, as we work through what contracts we have in place and when they're due for renewal, that will give us a better idea of what that timeline might look like. You'll be aware that we have a number of contracts. We're moving more to a 5-year term on our contracts that were previously operated on sort of 2 to 3 years. So that work will help determine what sort of a timeline we're looking at. The living wage have advised that typically those timelines take place. So for what's called phased implementation, which is the approach that we're taking, post-accreditation can take up to 3 years because of that approach that phases it. But as I say, we're aiming to combine this work with the work around social value. So we're hoping to not take 3 years, but in order to manage your expectation, that's what we've been advised by the Living Wage Foundation is a typical timeline.
Okay, makes sense. I was going to ask, you talked about a phased implementation. Presumably there's another option which we previously discussed, which is to implement it kind of almost immediately or within the short term.
Yes, that is an option, but that is probably what Peter would say is probably a risky option from a legal point of view. We would need to have commitment in terms of full council approval to go to accreditation, and then we would need to mandate payment of the living wage to all of our suppliers. And at the moment, without having done that piece of analysis, we are not yet fully sighted on the full financial implications of that. So we'd be having to ask full council to make a decision without that full knowledge, as well as any potential procurement risks that we might face by mandating it, sort of with immediate effect.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you both. Any further comments or queries? Councillor Winnington.
Thanks. I think it's worth saying, certainly from a health, wellbeing and social care point of view, and I'm sure it's true for other parts of the council as well, that some of the move towards this for contracted work and suppliers is also around other ways of working and other forms of working with the contractors and suppliers as well. So if we went to to mandate this in isolation, that could put at risk some of the work that's being done. So, for example, some of the work to do with placements in independent care homes, etc. Some of that was due to start about April last year, and then because of the pandemic, has got completely put to one side, and we're having to effectively start from scratch with the new situations we find ourselves in the care market as we are now, and obviously the pandemic is still having an impact. So I think part of that, if you try to mandate it to do it in isolation, then all the other stuff that sort of fits in with it, which is really positive in terms of the way we're working with some of our contractors and suppliers, wouldn't work, or you might actually have issues where contractors or suppliers might say, no, we're not having this, we're pulling out, because the other things that are kind of packaged around it, which is going to enable some really positive things, not just in terms of pay, but also in terms of the way that people get services, or in my portfolio's case, care, etc., and make it most person focused. And indeed, talking about obligations, the ethical and residential care charters, of course, we've signed up to as a city. That could have an impact on the implementation of those if we don't marry those in with the living wage at the same time, because then we can get that whole package.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Some really important things for us to consider moving forward. Okay, everyone, unless there are any questions, I think this report is just to note, and we'll continue to move forward. General thumbs up. Brilliant. Thank you very much. That takes us to the final item on today's agenda. This is being presented by the Chief Executive in relation to senior management restructure and the integration of health and social care.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, for this committee, the main issue here is the council appointing an appropriate statutory director of adult social care. But I do think, I felt that it was important that as the employment committee, you also had some information about how things have been changing over the last few years in terms of the council's integration across care and health, and also how various changes in the pipeline are going to impact on that, both in terms of general awareness, but also, I guess, a recognition that because we are now quite closely interrelated with our health colleagues, some of the activity takes place with the employment committee and with our own internal arrangements. Some of it takes place with the NHS systems around employment. But the main purpose for today is for you to consider my recommendation to you that we replace in the role of statutory director of social services Mr. Innes Richards, who has decided to leave the council. And huge thanks to Innes. He's been a great colleague to work with us and has taken us a long way. And I think we're very fortunate within the council to have Andy Biddle in post. Confusingly, Andy's post is also titled Director of Adult Social Services, but it doesn't carry that statutory piece. And my recommendation to you is that we take advantage of the fortunate position that we're in and we approve Andy in that post. But just by way of a bit of a background, back in 2015, you asked me to look to strengthen the integration between ourselves. A lot of that, and I'm really pleased with the progress that we've made, and I set that out in section 4, both in terms of the more general changes that we put in place, but also I think at the moment particularly just highlighting some of the advantages that has given us in terms of how we've been able to address the COVID pandemic over the last year. So we've now got a number of joint posts between the council and the CCG, and also we've got some joint posts with some of the health providers as well. Another thing that's been going on concurrently is, I guess, I mean, it has been referred to as sort of reorganisation by stealth, but there's been a lot of change going on in terms of the organisation of the NHS. And just before Christmas, we had a consultation paper about the future of integrated care systems, ICSs as they're known. I'm sorry, there's ever such a lot of three-letter acronyms in all of this. The ICS for our area includes Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, so it includes both cities as well as the whole of Hampshire County area and the Isle of Wight area. So we have been working closely with that emergent ICS for a few years now. We will continue to do so, but the consultation paper followed by a white paper called Integration and Innovation, Working Together to Improve Health and Social Care for All. That was published in February. And the long and the short of it, I've set out in paragraph 5.3 the main elements of that. But as far as this committee is concerned, and as far as the immediate interface between the City Council and the health system is concerned, it would mean that they would give statutory status to the ICSs. They haven't had that to date. The ICSs would effectively absorb the functions currently undertaken by the CCGs. So that is very significant. It would also allow the ICSs to delegate significantly to what they call in health the place level. And for us, that is the level that aligns with the upper tier local authority boundary. So for us, it's Portsmouth. And of course, we had a common boundary with our CCG. So there are various other changes there. There's a very ambitious timeline associated with the white paper and its transfer into legislation. So I think the NHS are hoping that this will be in place sometime next year. And I think it's important that in the time between now and then, and continuing to work closely with the ICS, we look to improve the depth and breadth of our integration with our health colleagues to the benefit of our residents. I think when you read the white paper, I think it should give us a huge amount of encouragement, because so much in there aligns with what we've been doing over the last nearly 10 years, actually, but it's accelerated a significant amount over the last 5 or 6 years. So I do think that we are well placed, both as a city council, but also as a city, in terms of the depth of the integration that we've got and how closely that aligns with the objectives set out in the white paper, including issues that try to get intervention further upstream in terms of prevention, in terms of population health, and so many other facets like that. So, as I said at the beginning, the main issue for you today is to decide whether or not you are content to follow my recommendation in terms of the appointment of the Statutory Director of Adult Social Care. I will continue, unless you say otherwise, to work very closely with our health colleagues and across our council to develop that level of integration. Those really are the principal recommendations. The other thing, though, that I think it would be really nice to do is to record our sincere thanks to Innes, who has taken us a long way on that journey, and we're all very sorry to leave him. But that's the gist of the report. In terms of the finances of it, it's effectively a direct exchange. There will be changes because we will be working closely with our CCG colleagues on the arrangements around joint posts. But in terms of the council's expenditure, there's no proposal to increase our expenditure on that DAS post from where we are at the moment. Across both the council and the CCG, there will be 2 senior posts going. There's another director post, but somebody has chosen to leave the CCG, and we will be working closely with our partner CCG to make sure that we've got the capacity in the right places to deliver a fully integrated health and care system. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. Thorough introduction. That's appreciated. We've got multiple people wanting to speak. Can we go to Councillor Jones first?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to support the Chief Executive's recommendations in this. I think it's a very thorough paper that clearly highlights the position that Portsmouth is in, the background, and why we're now having to endorse this through the Employment Committee. I did have the advantage of having a conversation with David about this last week as well, and I'd like to sort of start by following up what David's just said in terms of the committee placing on record its thanks to Innes. The joint appointment of Innes, whilst politicians love to take the credit, it was actually something David spoke to Councillor Stubbs and I about many years ago, 3 or 4, 5 years ago now, when that first joint post, the DAS and the Chief Operating Officer of the CCG became one person. And Innes formally joined us, having worked with us obviously on the Health and Wellbeing Board as co-commissioners for several years. It certainly was the right thing to do then. Officers were right to very much guide us down that path. It's certainly been to the benefit of Portsmouth City Council and the residents that we therefore care for. And I'm sure that the CCG have had some positives that have come out of it for them as well. But the ultimate aim here that we're all trying to do is to deliver the best services particularly for very vulnerable, disabled people in the city, those that have got learning disabilities or who are very elderly and very sick. And I think that through Innes's expertise and his very calm and gentle guiding way that he's taken us through quite a turbulent time in public health nationally, has certainly been a huge positive for the council and for the city of Portsmouth, and I'm very sad to see him go, I have to say. Having said that, the recommended replacement in Andy Biddle has many of those excellent qualities as well. You know, someone who I think has an enormous amount of experience, someone who over the last 3 to 4 years has really come into his own from, I mean, I'm not massively close to the adult social care portfolio as Councillor Winnington is, but having been the leader of the council and having had many briefings on quite complex issues with Andy, and Councillor Stubbs when he was the cabinet member, he is someone who I fully understand why David wants to put a lot of, responsibility on his shoulders and has trust and faith in him, because I think that Portsmouth will be in safe hands there. In terms of the integrated commissioning service, well, the devil's always in the detail, isn't it? With anything to do with government, white papers, reorganisations. The government continues to talk about devolution, and in a roundabout kind of way, although they are planning to take direct commissioning powers away from local authorities and centralise them more, I think it's kind of their devolution idea, even though it's actually, as I say, taking the decision making further away from the actual people and into more of a health-based semi-regional structure. I think it's either going to be brilliant or awful. I don't think there'll be any in between. I'm not convinced about it as the ICS model, but I think that's because I don't have enough detail. So it's my own fault. I should have read up on it more. I just want to make sure that whoever we have sitting on our health and wellbeing board or the new ICS board has the clout, the clarity, the confidence, the understanding to make, to pull back where they are concerned that the train is running away in a direction that doesn't serve the people of Portsmouth. So whoever that may be that sits on that board, be it, elected, a politician and or our officers, so Andy, David, that we just make sure we try and keep a rein on it, because we know how these things can very quickly run away, and particularly on such a wide piece as Hampshire. Anyway, that's it from me, but thank you very much. I fully support David's recommendation, and if Andy is successful in being appointed, I wish him all the luck.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Vernon-Jackson. You are on mute.
I am on mute. I think Cal had his hand up before me.
Okay.
And good manners would suggest he should come before me.
Thank you, Gerald. Yeah, I'm kind of very happy with the report, and I've got no issue with the recommendations. I guess more for my own knowledge, I'm just interested in the process of recruitment of directors, and how that works and how that relates to the function of the employment committee.
Yeah, it is a bit unusual, Cal. In terms of this committee's remit, it extends to the director tier. So this falls within the remit of the committee. It would be I mean, first of all, there's the issue. Well, should we replace the post? We haven't got a lot of choice with this one, because we've got a statutory obligation in terms of the DAS role. But you would be perfectly entitled to say, well, actually, we'd like to test this in the marketplace. There's nothing to stop you doing that. I'm recommending that on this occasion, you don't need to do that. We're very lucky having Andy in post. And really, what we're adding to his role particularly is the statutory element of it. I have a feeling what we did when we appointed Innes, I think we discussed it at a sort of formal committee level, and then if I remember rightly, and Donna might recall this, I think we had a little internal discussion with the portfolio holder and the leader and the clinical lead from the CCG, because of course at that stage Innes was working across both organisations. We've moved on a long way now in terms of the relationship between the CCG and the council. So we've got a number of posts. So Alison Jeffrey, for example, in the children's role, it's a joint post. Helen, as Director of Public Health, has a responsibility to the CCG as well as she does to ourselves. But yeah, so you have got some choices, Cal. But my recommendation to you in all of the circumstances is that I think you are unencumbered to confirm if you wish Andy to take up that mantle. We will then work with our colleagues in the CCG to make sure that we've got the appropriate backfilling for Andy's role, and then we will do similarly within the CCG, because I'm a director of the CCG board, to make sure that with both Innes and Tracy Sanders, also the other director leaving the CCG, that across our two remits we've got the level of capability and capacity that we require.
Okay, thank you, David. Can I just quickly come back, Chair? Yeah, that's fine. As I say, I've got no issue with the report or the recommendations. It was more just a question of process, and from my own understanding, I'm one of those boring people that reads the Constitution from time to time, and I note that the constitutional remit of this committee is to be responsible for the recruitment of directors. So yeah, I was just keen to understand what that looks like in practice. But yeah, I'll take the explanation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor. Leader.
All I'd like to say is I think the report's a very sensible one, pragmatic one, and to record my thanks to Innes and all that he's done at the City Council. I have to say that to begin with, I was worried that he would just be a health professional and wouldn't get adult social care, but he really did, and that was a good appointment, and that's worked really, really well. I have fears for how the reorganisation will work here in Portsmouth. When I talk to paramedics, they are very clear that what we have here works well and works significantly better than in Hampshire in terms of getting people out of hospital and back home in a way that they're supported. And because we've worked so well with a Portsmouth PCT and then a Portsmouth CCG coterminous with the council, we've been able to do that work effectively and successfully. The stated ambition of the government reforms are that the councils and health service get closer together. My fear is that what will happen is we will go down to the lowest common denominator, which is Hampshire, where they don't work nearly as closely between health and social care as we work here in Portsmouth. And that we'll get from Portsmouth residents' point of view, the outcome of the government changes will be the exact opposite of what they intend. So I think we're going to have to work very hard to try to make sure that we don't lose the huge progress that's been made between health and social care. And I know with David and with Andy and Matt, we will have a team doing that very well, and I hope we're successful. But on the principles within the report and on Andy, I think it's a sensible option that we should take up and give him our full support.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Willington, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I just want to reassure Councillor Jones that even if you had have done all the reading you could do, you still might not be entirely clear on what the reorganisation means, because it is a minefield of suggestion and inference. I think would be a good way of putting it. Not least that the stated aim of the governance within any integrated care system is actually, well, we'll leave it up to the integrated care system on exactly how this works, which is actually an area where there might well be opportunity. And as David has alluded to, the integration we're doing is actually what the stated aims in the white paper are. Now, when the legislation comes, that might change, but I do think that it will be, the more we integrate, the more difficult it will be to unpick that or say you shouldn't be doing that because of this. So in that context, coming back to the report today, I'd obviously like to give my enormous thanks to Innes, who in the 3 years I've been in post has been fantastic, really incredibly supportive, and he really has moved that integration onto a different level. Integration that, of course, we've been doing in this city for a very long time, long before we had a joint post, but it's really taken on to that next level in terms of also how to have the vision to look at other ways that we can do more integration, as David has said, with those joint posts in adult social care, children's social care, and public health. But also on the other side, you've had the officers, including Joe York in particular, who's employed by the CCG, who has responsibilities within the council, and so it does go both ways. I completely endorse the way forward with this. Unfortunately, the CCG, as we now know, is no longer going to exist, so you can't have a joint post with an organisation that isn't going to exist anymore, because otherwise, when they cease to exist, you would have to do something else, and you would have someone with half a job. And even though the work on integration continues, but actually by having the staff who are going cross organisation, being employed with one organisation or another, but having responsibilities in another, that actually creates more of a solid footing to enable the the integration to continue. And I also think the other side of it, where we're going away from the CCG, I think Gerald alluded to this, is the fact that the work we're also doing with the acute hospital and with the community NHS trust in Solent is really critical as well, and they are a really key part of our integration in the city. And again, that the work that's being done there really does go out far beyond one post, even 4 posts. It goes out to those integrated teams we have in learning disabilities, for example, between ourselves and Solent, between ourselves and the hospital in terms of discharge, and of course the CCG in working all around things to do with public health and community health. So this report gives us the focus to continue that. It gives us a buffer to be able to have any pushback if we start to get pushed down on, and it's really a way forward that we can just make sure that we continue our integration, have a structure that does that, and means that we can get the very best outcomes for the people in Portsmouth for the future. And it gives all of us councillors that security to know that we've got the right structure in place to really have that take that approach.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Unless there are any other comments, I think we can move this forward. It sounds like we've got a unanimous agreement, and I would just echo what many people have said and put my thanks on record for Ines and look forward to Andy moving forward with this additional responsibility. Unless there's any dissent, we'll consider the recommendations approved as written. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. In which case, that takes us to the end of today's Employment Committee meeting. Thank you for some very sensible and helpful discourse, and I look forward to seeing you all soon, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Bye all.
Our turn of the live streaming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.